This video was made possible by Skillshare, a great place to learn new skills. The first 500 people to use the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial. Let's start with the obvious. Bad things happen. When they do, it's often in our best interest to have an open discussion about why they happen. But some things are so bad that mainstream culture deems them unspeakable. These are the acts that you don't even want to imagine doing. They're the kind of acts that you probably don't believe you're capable of doing. These are the acts that we call evil. Like many people, you might think that evil emerges out of a psychopathic or sadistical nature, but unfortunately, this just isn't so. The world witnessed such acts during World War II and, more specifically, the Holocaust. When Adolf Eichmann, one of the main figures responsible for organizing the systematic killing of millions, was put on trial, he said that he was just following orders. This thought is frightening. This is the kind of statement that makes you rethink the idea of evil. It transforms evil from being the work of a small minority to a product of the vast majority. Perhaps evil is what happens when people stop thinking for themselves and just obey the orders of others. If so, the capacity for evil lies within all of us. This is the context in which Stanley Milgram conducted his renowned experiments on obedience. It's a chilling experiment that reminds us that with the ability for great good comes the ability for great evil. To really understand the Milgram experiments, it helps to split it up into 2 tests, the fake one and the real one. Let's start with the fake one. There are 3 participants, the experimenter, a teacher, and a learner. The subject that Milgram was studying was always given the role of teacher. The learner was an actor that was in on the experiment. The actual study was disguised as a fake study that was said to be testing the effects of punishment on learning. Specifically, they were testing the effects of administering electric shocks on a learner's ability to memorize a list of word pairs. For example, green flower or couch potato. The subject was tasked with teaching the learner this list. The subject would go through the list once and then read off one of the words in a pair. If the learner guessed the word correctly, the subject would move on to the next pair. But if they guessed incorrectly, the subject was supposed to administer an electric shock. Shocks went up in 15-volt increments all the way up until 450 volts. There were also corresponding labels indicating the intensity of shocks ranging from slight shock to simply XXX. The real test underlying this fake one was to see how far subjects would be willing to go in administering shocks before they stopped. At the shock level of 300 volts, the subject would hear the learner pounding on the wall and begin refusing to answer. A second pound was heard at 315 volts. This test was designed to put the subject in a tug-of-war between obeying their own morals and obeying an authority figure. If the subject began hesitating, the experimenter used 1 of 4 prods to get him to continue. They ranged in intensity from simple requests to orders. The results of the test were shocking. 65% of participants administered the maximum level of shocks. All participants obeyed until 300 volts. Various forms of Milgram's experiments have been replicated several times and continue to produce similar results, although modifying different conditions seems to produce varying levels of obedience. After going through a lot of the literature, the question isn't do we obey, but when and why. I think the best place to start is with Milgram's interpretation of the experiment, but before you can understand it, you have to understand his view of obedience as a natural phenomenon. Milgram believed that humans evolved the capacity to organize into social hierarchies because it was a huge survival advantage. Instead of competing as individuals, we could work together as a powerful group. In order to create these hierarchies, humans must be capable of giving up control to an external source. This could be another person or an idea. If 2 independent people give up control to a third person, the third person can coordinate the entire group. For example, imagine a group of cars giving up control to the commands of a traffic cop. By giving up their personal autonomy, traffic can flow in a more coordinated fashion. However, if they all act on their own, traffic will flow less efficiently and accidents are more likely to happen. There are social hierarchies all around you. When you enter a hierarchy, Milgram believed that you'd undergo a critical shift in mindset from that of an autonomous individual to that of an agent. When you enter a hierarchy and become an agent, you no longer feel responsible for your actions, but responsible to the one above you. This new mindset is known as the agentic state. To understand this state, it helps to separate it into a few components: the capacity for agency, why we become an agent, the features of an agent, and what keeps us from exiting the agentic state. Milgram argues that the agentic state has been socialized in us through family, school, and work because these environments value obedience, reward us for it, and punish us for disobedience. So why would you choose to become an agent? Imagine that you're taking part in this experiment. You walk into the room. What do? If you want the experiment to run effectively, you need to cooperate with the group. Recall that one of the most effective ways to coordinate a group is to designate a leader. Someone has to be in charge, right? Since this is a new hierarchy that you're entering into, you know that you're not in charge. You assign that role to the experimenter because you perceive them to be a legitimate authority. You willingly enter this hierarchy because it has a guiding ideology that you believe in and would be willing to further: progress and science. Lastly, the experimenter makes demands of you that are appropriate for the hierarchy that you're in. He makes demands with regards to the experiment and not unrelated things. He doesn't tell you what to eat for dinner. All of these factors combined allow you to willingly accept the role of an agent. Now that we have become an agent, what does this shift in mindset entail? When we are in the hierarchy, we tend to value the word of our superiors more than our inferiors. Continuing our example, you're not going to take advice from the learner on how to conduct the experiment. That's because you seem at an equal or lower position in the hierarchy. We also reinterpret our actions with regards to the mission of the hierarchy, for example, scientific progress. Keep in mind that we have willingly entered this hierarchy as an agent with a belief in its guiding mission. This leads to the most important feature of being an agent. We no longer feel responsible for our actions, but responsible to carrying out the wishes of the one above us. But once we've entered the agentic state, what keeps us there? If we hear the pounding and feel we are doing something morally wrong, why can't we leave? Milgram's first reason is consistency. To admit that our current action is wrong would mean that we have to admit that all of our actions leading up to this point were wrong. This is a very tough pill to swallow, and most people would rather not do it. The second reason is that we feel an obligation to the experimenter. We already made a commitment to help him and we want to uphold it. The third reason is that all participants entered and began this experiment under a specific situational definition. We acknowledged that the authority was legitimate, knew what he was doing, and deserved to be higher up in the hierarchy than us. Violating this or any socially agreed upon situational definition produces feelings of awkwardness and discomfort because we are disrupting the social order. Lastly, there are feelings of anxiety associated with disobeying an authority figure. We have been socialized to respect authority figures, and anticipating that we may have to disobey and disrupt the social order makes us anxious. But new studies shine light on different aspects of Milgram's studies. Some studies suggest something along the lines of a trusted expert that motivates subjects to continue obeying. They believe that they could trust that the scientist knew more about the experiment than they did, or that they could trust that a scientist would act responsibly. Based on an individual's life experience, these would be reasonable beliefs to hold. The experimenter had even told participants that the shocks were painful but not dangerous. So the real reason they continued was because they didn't believe that the learner was actually in any real danger. Other studies suggest that participants continued to obey because they believed that they were agents of a worthy ideology. Specifically, one study found that of the 4 prods that Milgram used, the one most resembling an order was the least effective, and the one most resembling an appeal to science was the most effective. In this case, it would seem that subjects are actually motivated by the belief that their actions are for the benefit of science. In both explanations, participants would believe that they were doing the right thing. Alternatively, some people believe that Milgram's experiments were nothing but theater and invalid as a scientific experiment. On the other hand, many believe that Milgram did stumble upon something significant, but there isn't universal agreement over exactly what that is. We can't make a jump from Milgram's results to explaining the actions of those involved in the Holocaust. The experiment itself was conducted in a lab setting, and so we have to be careful about interpreting those results with regards to real life. But it does provide us with a lot of food for thought about how different situations can affect the actions we take. Milgram's experiments serve as a critical reminder that a potential monster lies deep within each of us, and it would be in our best interest to be mindful of that. But let me know your thoughts. Why do you think we obey? Speaking of authority figures, one of the best ways to become one is to have legitimate knowledge and competence in a field. These are things that you have to work for, and it doesn't always come cheap. But thankfully, Skillshare is offering our viewers a 2-month free trial that gives you access to their extensive library of courses, which you can use to build up your expertise. They have courses on a variety of topics including animation, illustration, writing, and even business. One course that I'd recommend is How to Share Ideas That Inspire People by the best-selling author Simon Sinek. In it, he teaches us how to become a captivating presenter. If that's something that you're interested in, you can use the link in the description to get 2 free months of learning, and after that, it's just $10 a month. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.